Welcome to our next video discussion. This is a follow-up on our other tape related to groups and group dynamics. This gets into a little bit more detail and is going to deal with how you go about behaving within a team, and then should you be put into a leadership role, how you go about leading individuals within a team. And then I'll wrap up with some information that we gathered from the special ops community and the military about how they go about leading very, very high-performing teams. So at the beginning, when you're put into a group, your first thing is to commit to that group. You're responsible to make sure that you're fully engaged and that you're going to be practicing your active listening skills during your team meetings and your planning and your work sessions. So get ready so that you can listen to the whole message that your teammates are giving to you. Check to make sure you're accurately reflecting what your teammates are asking you to do. And that gets critical because in the Crimson track, when you're in a team, the team is going to be evaluating your contribution to the team. So make absolutely certain that you're understanding the expectations of your teammates so that you know exactly what to deliver, when to deliver it, and how to meet their standards. And if you don't, that consequence can be very, very severe. And typically during a semester, there'll be one or two people in teams that didn't get these messages, and it does impact their grades. You want to come into a group with an open mind. We're putting you in these groups so that you can brainstorm like we talked about in the other area and try to get as many ideas on the table as you possibly can. This is also a time for you to practice dealing with people that are different than you are. You're going to have people in your teams that are highly extroverted, highly introverted, and again, how do you work with those folks? You're going to find people that are very, very agreeable and others that are not. And then how do you work through somebody that you find may be pretty off-putting? Some people are very conscientious and others are not. So again, you're going to have to work along that whole band. You want to deal with people that are both emotionally stable and some that tend to bring drama to every session. So again, practice your skills in dealing with that. And you also will find that some people are very open to new experiences. They love to explore. They get very excited about exploring. And you have to be able to deal with them so that you can rein them in should they get a little bit carried away in their enthusiasm. So within teams, we talked about the tasks that are performed. Here's some additional ways to take a look at roles that you can play in a team. You can be the giver and seeker of information. You can be the giver and seeker of opinions within the organization. As we talked about before, you can be the person that elaborates. You can be the person that energizes. You can be the person that's really good at reviewing what your team's done and recording. So you can take a look at the clip. That is an infantry squad that's going through fire and maneuvering activities, and you can see in the front there are people that are laying down fire to suppress the enemy while the other team moves, and it's that leapfrog effect that only functions when people take on the roles that are appropriate for what they're trying to accomplish. There's also the maintenance roles within a group, and we talked about those being encouragement, harmonizing, tension relievers, gatekeepers. There's also a very critical role that I've found, and that is the food bringer role. So many teams tend to work better when somebody's bringing snacks or something to energize the group, and you get extra points for being somebody that plays that role. You're going to get into groups that engage in dysfunctional behavior. One behavior is what we call blocking or put downs of other people. It's taking the cheap shots all the time. That's very off-putting to team members. You need to be prepared to deal with that if you're the recipient or if you're seeing somebody else doing it. Somebody may be overly aggressive, like the clip that's attached to this. And again, you're going to have to be able to help people dial it down. And again, if the aggression is directed at you, learn how to process that and to deflect it. You have people that are amazing storytellers. The problem is, I'm giving you a lot of class time, Crimson, to be working on your projects. That's an hour and 15 minutes, and you don't want to spend an hour and 14 minutes with somebody telling stories. You want to keep them on target. Some people are addicted to recognition. They have the type of personality where they want to be the corpse at the funeral and the bride at the wedding. They just need to be at center all the time, and again, you have to help modify their behaviors. People tend to be domineering. Again, one thing I've noticed, particularly in undergraduates, is you're all used to sort of being in the star, and now all of a sudden you're in a group with 5 other stars, and it gets very, very stressful. There are people that bring drama to every session, and again, you can be the calm force that dials back the drama kings and drama queens so that they can stay on target. People have special interests that they want to talk about, like the storytellers, and bring all of that into the team that has nothing to do with what you're trying to accomplish. There are people that are very distracting, sort of the class clown that doesn't seem to want to focus, is there for a good social activity. And then we talked about the quiet people that tend to withdraw. You have all these aggressive, drama-ridden folks in a group, and they're saying, my God, what did I get into? And they just simply go back into a shell. As a good team member and team leader, you need to be able to draw them out so you can get their wit and wisdom. So an overall strategy to deal with a group, if you're in a leadership position, is you want to plan how each meeting is going to open, and you want to chart how the meeting is going to flow. The seating strategically, if you have somebody that's very domineering and intimidating, set that person next to you. And if you're the person in authority, that tends to dial them down. If you have somebody that's seeking attention as a troublemaker, simply don't give them the gift of your eye contact. Always look at somebody else, and they'll pick up real quickly that this behavior is not getting them the attention that they want. You can assign tasks. Again, think about that quiet team member that's very shy. You can give them the task of doing a piece of the research or drafting something, and then put them on stage to present it so you can draw them out. You can agree before a meeting starts who's going to speak. You go first, you go second, you go third, and you say we're going to time it so that each person gets 5 minutes to share their ideas, and then we're going to move to the next person, and then enforce that. If behaviors are way out of hand, you have to step in and stop the behavior. If somebody's getting aggressive, you may need to step between the two people and dial that down. And then you want to be positively reinforcing the behaviors that are helping a group get its job done. And we're going to go into leadership here next, but leadership is not passive, it's active. So if you're placed in a leadership role in a team or in a group, you need to act as the leader. So let's take a look at leadership in general, and then see if we can translate that into how you perform within a group. First of all, leadership can be directed in a way that it can be incredibly positive, it can be uplifting, it can be good for the group, it can be good for society, or a strong leader can also do evil. So leadership in and of itself is neutral. It's how the individual engages in leadership that makes the determination of good or evil. Leadership also is very, very complex, but I like to keep things relatively simple. I see leadership as operating in 3 dimensions. One is the environment that you're in, the context in which you're operating. The next is you as the lead of a group, the leader, and you have your needs, wants, emotions that have to be understood. And then there's the follower that has need, wants, and emotions that if you're in a leader, if you're in a leadership role, you have to understand those as well. And while it seems simple, the exchange that takes place between these 3 dimensions gets incredibly complex. Your author laid out some studies on leadership, and again, you will have been exposed to those in HRB 101. but let's go back over them so you get kind of a quick refresher. That they're the behavior theories of leadership, which said people that have certain traits tend to be good leaders. They're people that focus on either getting the job done, or people tend to be seen as good leaders in a particular situation. And then there's different styles of leadership. You can be very autocratic, very, very directive. You can be democratic, where you want to hear what everybody has to say. And you can be laissez-faire, where you let people do their own thing. And again, going back to that leadership triangle, you have to understand the environment that you're in and the people that are following you so that you can pick the behaviors that are going to be most effective in leading. Your author also talked about situational types of leadership, and Fiedler laid out in his study the relationship between the power that the individual holds and the type of task that has to be performed. And again, you develop a leadership style that's appropriate given those two variables. Hersey and Blanchard had developed a model that goes from the tell and sell to really the delegate style. And again, you go back through and you look at the environment you're in, you look at the needs of the followers, and then you're either directive, or you're persuasive, or you're democratic, or I have a great deal of confidence in you, I'm just going to give you the task to take care of. And then House and his research said you really need to pay attention to the needs of the follower and meet their needs to be able to accomplish your goal. Again, if you're confused about any of these theories, come on in on our Monday colloquials, and we'd be glad to dig deeper into them. And your author also gives you a nice summary of them in the text. There's some more recent approaches to leadership that are fascinating. Victor Vroom has a model that lays out, in this situation, you either are directive or you engage the group in the decision-making process. And when you read that, think about your group and the tasks that you're trying to perform, and you can see whether you, as the leader of that group, should be telling the group what needs to be done, or whether you should be engaging in a group dynamic that'll come up with a solution to what you're trying to accomplish. And then there's the transformational leaders, which we're seeing on the stage today. Things are incredibly complex. We're seeing that organizations are going through tremendous change, and they're looking for leaders that can inspire. So transformational leadership really touches the heart of the people, motivates them to respond emotionally more than rationally, and it helps use that passion to drive the organization to an outcome that's much bigger than itself. If you're lucky in your career, you'll have an opportunity to work for one or two transformational leaders, and you'll find that they energize you to the point that you're anxious to go to work every day, and you're very fired up about the products that you can produce. So let's take a look into a different world, and this is a special ops community. I've had the opportunity to work with and to meet a couple of individuals that have done some fair amount of research in this. General Cohen, Bill Cohen, who lives down in Pasadena and now runs his own leadership institute, wrote a very, very good book on the secrets of the special ops leadership. Ken Berquist, General Berquist, also shared his thinking on how you can make these teams far more effective. And Colonel Ray Morris, who's retired, has written a book called The Ether Zone, which goes into the dynamics of leading in a very high-risk environment. So while these are set in a military context, you can think about them in a business context. And what they've established is that there are some clear principles that a leader needs to establish when you're going into a high-risk situation. One is everybody on the team has to understand the purpose, so there's a very clear purpose articulated. That the teams practice, practice execution before they go on a mission. So they drill to where when their boots are on the ground, they can execute almost in their sleep. That in high-risk environments, you have to take action. Speed is critical, and you need to get things done. So there's a time to plan, there's a time to rehearse, and then you got to execute. And keep it simple, that the plans to make teams operate in very complex environment tend to be very simple, very direct, very clear purpose. And again, when you're in teams trying to meet the deadlines that I'm giving you in class, particularly in the Crimson, think about these 4 elements when your team comes together. What is your purpose? Who has what skills? Let's practice by writing drafts, or let's practice our oral presentations. Let's get it done so that we're done maybe a week before the due date so we can make adjustments, and keep the planning very, very simple so that everybody understands their role. We also had the opportunity to do a study about 10 years ago, and I was curious as to what are the traits of people that lead in these environments. And I sent out a survey to special ops personnel all the way from World War II through Afghanistan. When I did the study, the American military had just gone into Afghanistan. And I gave them 20 different attributes of a very exemplary leader in this context. And what was fascinating is all the way from World War II through Afghanistan, what the people on the ground wanted from their leaders are 2 things. One, that the leader was competent, that they knew what they were doing, that they knew what needed to be accomplished. And the second, they were bone honest, that they didn't sugarcoat, they laid out exactly what the risks were, they laid out exactly what the mission was. There was absolute transparency with the teams. So I think you can take that into your personal life. If you're leading, establish a reputation of somebody that is competent, and establish a reputation of somebody that is honest with the people that you're asking to follow you. So he made a case that teams are good, high-risk teams, high-performing teams are exceptional, but I wanted to give you one caveat to give you something to think about when you're building teams once you leave university. One is that within these teams, they set very high realistic standards for each other, and they will drive each other to the point that they'll burn out. So if you're leading these teams, you have to monitor the emotional and physical health of the people that you're asking to do these difficult things, because they don't understand quit. There's just no quit in their vocabulary. The second is something that I want you to take away from this course. And when you're in high-performing environments and you're with high-performing people, there's very limited forgiveness if you violate their trust. So if you have a breach of character, there's a high probability you are not going to be forgiven for the rest of your life. And the gentleman on the right is retired General Hugh Shelton, who retired out of the military as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Colonel Morris, on the left-hand side, wrote a book called The Ether Zone, in which he wrote about the activities and actions of a special ops unit in Vietnam. And General Shelton happened to be a member of that unit. So I thought, what a great way to get my book recognized in the marketplace. I'll ask General Shelton to write the foreword. So he contacted General Shelton. General Shelton said, send me the galley. He sent him the galley, and Shelton got back to Colonel Morris and said, I can't write the foreword because your book is not accurate. Well, think about it. Colonel Morris has now dedicated about 4 or 5 years of his life going through records and interviewing personnel to try to get as accurate a story developed as he could, and now General Shelton pops his balloon. So Ray went back and said, General, what's the problem? And General Shelton said, there's a couple lines in the book that are absolutely inaccurate. And the lines were, during this period of time, lieutenants led reconnaissance teams in lieu of sergeants, and these lieutenants performed well. And he said, Colonel Morris, I relieved 2 of those lieutenants of their command because they were not performing. So think about this, that here are two young men that were put in leadership positions 40 years ago. And they did not perform well. They did not exhibit the character that was needed to lead those teams. And General Shelton still has not forgiven them for their failure of character. So as you work in a team, particularly one that's doing really well, every day that you have contact with your team, you're building your reputation. And you can lose that reputation in a heartbeat, so keep that in mind as we go through the semester. Thank you.